Welcome to Is This a Great Game or What? With the Hall of Famer, my dad, Tim Kirkshin. I am his son, Jeff Kirkshin. And officially, we have started season 2 of our podcast. And in celebration of that, Dad, we're bringing back the very first guest we ever had on the podcast. Eduardo Perez is going to be joining us today.
Right, our dear friend, he will make us laugh today, I promise. And Jeff, I'm still amazed we got through year one. You and I had no idea what we were doing at this time last year, but we did 35 regular season episodes, a bunch of off-season episodes, and today starts our first week in which we're doing 2 podcasts every week for the baseball season.
Yeah, and I look back to the time we recorded with Eduardo, little inside baseball here. We recorded that interview with him before we had even really recorded anything with you and I. We were just kind of figuring it out. So if you want to look back, way back, season 1, episode 1, you can hear that interview. But
And we still have a lot to figure out, Jeff, here in year 2. But we promise everyone what we promised them all year. Where you're going to laugh and you're going to learn when you listen to this show. No heavy lifting, no difficult stuff. It's going to be fun, and we're going to learn something, too.
Yeah, we've got a lot of great new segments we're excited to share with you. We've been really excited to expand to 2 days a week, as Dad mentioned. So we're going to be releasing Tuesdays at midnight and Fridays at midnight now. So Tuesdays was our original day. Now we're also going to be releasing on Fridays at midnight as well. And if you're listening right now, most likely it's either mid-game or already happened, the unofficial but official first game of the baseball season in Tokyo.
Right, and the Cubs are playing the Dodgers. And Jeff, I saw the Dodgers twice this spring in Arizona. It is amazing how good they are. Now, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to win the World Series, but I can tell you the depth on their starting rotation is ridiculous, if assuming everyone is healthy, which no one is ever healthy for an entire season anymore. The depth of the everyday lineup is equally ridiculous. The money they spent to put this team together was absurd, and it's going to be examined at some point by Major League Baseball. But there's no way around this. The Dodgers are a great watch, whether you love them or hate them, and it's so beautiful that they are opening the season in Tokyo because Roki Sasaki, a rookie, is going to be one of the pitchers, of course, and Yoshi Yamamoto, who had a great rookie year when he wasn't hurt last year, they're going to be starting games 1 and 2 in Japan against the Cubs, and Shota Imanaga, who had a terrific rookie year for the Cubs, he will be starting one of those games also.
Wow.
So if you're not going to start with a parade in Cincinnati, like we used to when I was a kid and when I first started covering baseball, I'm okay with opening in Japan as we try to globalize the game, grow the game. If you're going to do it, this is the year to do it. And you have to do it with the Dodgers and the Cubs.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for baseball. So opening day, for those who don't know, will be a week from Thursday. So we'll obviously be releasing an episode the day after that. We'll be able to react this Friday to the Japan series. But as Dad mentioned, right, we're not that show that's going to give you all the breaking news and all the trades and all the things that happen. We want to bring baseball to you, to the fathers, the sons, the mothers, the daughters out there. That's what this show is all about. So we're really excited. If you're new here, thank you. Thank you. Thank the person who sent this podcast to you, because we're really excited for an exciting year this year. Now, we're recording this on St. Patrick's Day, and Dad, I know you're really excited to share your Team Tim for St. Patty's Day.
I'm not really excited. It's not the greatest list ever. It's not the All Eclipse team, but I worked really hard at coming up with the All St. Patrick's Day team. So if anyone is listening at home and has less of a life than I do, who wants to tackle this and see if you can come up with a player at each position for the all St. Patrick's team, let's give it a whirl. But in the meantime, Jeff, I just got back from spring training.
Right.
Of course, we already been over this. I went to Arizona for a week. I went to Florida for 8 days. We had a really interesting conversation. Eduardo Perez, our guest today, Carl Ravitch and myself, and Buster Olney, because we did the game on March the 3rd between the Red Sox and the Orioles. So in talking to Brandon Hyde, he looked at us and basically volunteered. He said, "Have you seen Tampa Bay's starting rotation this
Oh,
week.
when
He
talking
said,
about how stacked the division
everyone
is.
in their rotation, he says, throws 98 miles an hour. Taj Bradley, of course, Shane McClanahan is back. Drew Rasmussen is back. Ryan Pepio, Shane Baz is back. So just when you're ready to say that the Rays, they can't make the playoffs this year because they don't have a stadium and they have to play in a minor league stadium, you look at their rotation and it's really, really good.
I have to give a lot of credit to Brandon Hyde. Did you see how they told Zach Eflin that he was going to be the opening day starter?
Yes, why don't you tell everyone?
Oh, I mean, just the cutest video. So Zach Eflin, girl dads. What's up, Zach Eflin? Brandon Hyde had his wife and their daughters FaceTime in to tell their dad that you're going to be the opening day starter.
That's great, and that's typical Brandon Hyde. And Zach Eflin, one of the best guys you'll ever meet, I'm sure appreciated that tremendously. The other thing was we asked Brandon Hyde, like, what was the transaction within the American League East, which is a beast, as we know, that is going to be the most noteworthy? And he looked at us like, what a stupid question that is. He said Alex Bregman is the biggest acquisition by any team in the AL East this year, because Alex Bregman is obviously a multiple world champion. He's one of the best third basemen in the game. His arrogance, and I mean this as a positive, is just what the Red Sox needed. They needed to bring in a champion to show the rest of their guys how this is going to be done. So the Red Sox have these three remarkable young players, and who are all going to be stars in the big leagues someday, and they just let Alex Bregman sit next to them. They put his locker next to their lockers so they could all learn from him. He took a road trip just to be with those three young guys to make sure they all understood that what spring training is all about. And Alex Cora had a dinner with Roman Anthony, one of the guys, Christian Campbell, one of the guys, Marcelo Meyer, one of the guys, and Alex Bregman said, "Can I go to dinner with you guys?" And they said, "Of course." And he had already eaten, but he just wanted to hang out with the Red Sox big three. He is going to make such a difference in that team. And Jeff, I know we're not into predictions here or hot takes or anything, but I'm telling you, with all the other injuries within the division, it's not out of the question that the Red Sox could win the AL East this year. And one of the biggest reasons is Alex Bregman.
Did you also hear the story that Alex Bregman actually bought suits for the prospects in the Red Sox system to be like, hey, this is my gift to you. Suit up, make yourself feel good, and be ready to be a major leaguer.
And on a completely different level. But this is what Willie Mays used to do for young players for the Giants. This is what Juan Marichal used to do for young pitchers on the Giants, 60, 70 years ago. So Alex Bregman is doing, and he's rich enough to do it, but he wants to make sure that everyone knows that they belong here. And when they get here, they're going to be even more ready. And Bregman, it looks like for sure now, is going to play third base. And, it's a really tough thing because Rafael Devers is on a Hall of Fame track as a third baseman. But clearly, Alex Bregman is the better defensive player. He's the best defensive third baseman in the American League. He won a Gold Glove there. So Devers is going to be likely the everyday DH. We'll see if he can handle it. I think he can, but I think they're doing the right move, and Alex Cora convinced Rafael Devers Alex Bregman needs to play third. That's why we will be a better team.
Alex Bregman, Willie Mays, Tim Kirkshin, all sharing suits. You have bequeathed me many a suits in my time to get me ready. Now, I'm not going to go play in the major leagues, but for a while there, we were both 38 shorts.
Right.
So now I've kind of grown a little bit bigger than a 38 short.
I don't think Willie Mays bought any 38 shorts for Felipe Alou in the late 50s or anything like that. Yeah, so
I don't think so.
Those are just a few takeaways from spring training. Although I must share this with you, Jeff. I went to see the Yankees.
Yeah.
This was before Garrett Cole went down. It's a massive injury, terrible for the game, terrible for the Yankees. But I was struck by this. I walk into the Yankees clubhouse for the first time, and I walk past Aaron Boone's office, and he's got people in there, so I'm not just going to barge in and say hi to my old teammate, but he invites me in. And they're having a discussion, not an argument, between one of the instructors there and Tim Naring, who's from the front office, a former major leaguer, and of course, Aaron Boone. So the question they asked me, because I had to break the tie, is it a glove or a mitt?
Oh.
So we've been over this, Jeff.
100 times. This is one of the first things I learned as a kid.
Right. So I had to explain it's a glove. And then Tim Naring interrupted me and said, well, what about the catcher? And I said, no, that's a mitt. Okay?
Two different things.
That's a glove because it's got fingers on it. Okay?
Right.
A winter glove that you wear has fingers. A mitt, like mittens, doesn't have fingers. A catcher's mitt does not have fingers. A first baseman's mitt does not have fingers. So we got into that, and I ended up breaking the tie, and I told the catching instructor, it's a catcher's mitt.
It's a first baseman's mitt.
It's a catcher's mitt. It's a first baseman's mitt. Everyone else is wearing a glove. And then, of course, we went through all my other pet peeves about RBIs and complete game shutouts and batting around. I just wanted to let you know, I was in the Yankee clubhouse for 30 seconds, and now I'm in the middle of a pet peeve argument, and everyone agreed with me except the catching instructor. But then he looked at us and he said, all right, from now on, I'm going to call it a catcher's mitt.
Thank goodness, too. And the exciting part is, Dad, I feel like a lot in the first season of our show, we ended up leaving a lot on the cutting room floor, as they would say in our business, right? A lot of things we couldn't fit into weekly episodes. So now, Dad, we're going to be able to go into your pet peeves maybe on Fridays, or we're going to be able to go into From Ozzy to Oral, which we're going to talk about later. Like, these are the things that, in going twice a week, I'm really excited to dive into your pet peeve on RBIs, because trust me, my mom, your wife you've been married to, she doesn't care to hear that anymore after 40 years. But I know that the audience of It's Just a Great Game or What will be really excited. So let's go to On This Date in Baseball History.
Right. So this one has a little more relevance for me today, Jeff, because on this date in 1991, Jim Abbott, pitcher for the Angels, hit a triple in a major league game. And you know that Jim Abbott was born without a right hand. Mm-hmm. So he pitched left-handed. He would carry his glove on this hand and switch it over so he could throw with his left hand. It was still one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. But on this day, he hit a triple in a spring training game. So I saw him in Arizona at a festival that I went to and Ryan Dempster was bringing up, celebrities to speak in front of the crowd. And one of them was Jim Abbott. So afterwards, he comes off the stage and I kind of flag him down. He comes over, I shake his hand and I say, by the way, Jim, that triple that you hit in 1991, and he looks at me and his eyes get this big and he goes, sinker down.
No.
Yeah. Rick Russell threw it. So he says, Rick Russell, sinker down. So this is how many years later, Jeff?
Oh, God.
34 years later. And he remembered the pitch and the pitcher of the triple that he hit in an exhibition game. And Jeff, if you want to talk about amazing feats in the game, and he doesn't consider it amazing because he was a good hitter in high school, Jim Abbott hit a triple in a big league game with only one hand. That's amazing.
That is really impressive. And the recall of baseball players, especially pitchers, but the recall of these players is just unbelievable. It brings me back to Jim Palmer last season. We had him on. Just to be able to remember what pitch he threw back in 1966 or whatever. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Now, we're going to introduce a new segment that's coming to the podcast here in 2025 called Poor Pop Pop. So, for those who don't know, my dad is called Pop Pop by his 3 grandchildren, and really by us now, because that's how everybody calls him. So, Pop Pop. And the reason why we called it this is because your dad, Pop.
Right. My dad, Pop, which is this fellow back here, he used to always say, poor Pop. Like when he wanted sympathy for fouling up something around the house or running out of gas, he would always say, poor Pop. And he didn't really want sympathy. He was the happiest man in the world. So we've just changed it now because of my dad, since I do everything like my dad did. And you are, of course, named Jeff after my dad. Yep. So the segment is called Poor pop up.
Because if there's one thing we hear, I don't want to say more than anything else, but a lot of comments I get about the podcast in the first season is nothing is more fun than when you get called out by me for something you might not recognize. Like when I taught you what a koozie was. You didn't know what a koozie was.
Right, Bob
Bob Cousy.
Number 14. Right, I got it. Right. So here's what happened. So we did a game in Jupiter this spring. Eduardo, Mike Monaco, myself, and Buster Olney. So we're doing an in-game interview with Ryan Helsley, a reliever for the Cardinals. Really, really good. So Mike, who's wicked smart, and he's like your age. He, by the way, told me I was not born. We were talking about the 80s, how great the 80s is. And he said, I missed the 80s. Like he wasn't even born in the 80s,
right?
Much like you.
1993.
Right. So Mike says to Ryan Helsley, like, how the Grillz going like that? And I'm sitting right next to Mike Monaco, and we're on the air. And they have this 2-minute conversation about Grillz, and Mike finally looks at me through all this, and he says, I wish everyone could see the look on Tim's face because it's a look of total confusion. And I had to say on the air, I didn't understand one word that anybody said for the last 2 minutes. So explain what a grill is.
You also had Eduardo on the show, and he is also very informed when it comes to things of this day and age.
And he's the coolest guy in the world.
Yeah.
I'm the biggest square ever. I'm divisible by 4. This is terrible. I didn't understand any of it. So why don't you, young guy, explain to me what grills are?
Well, really popularized in the early 2000s, right? Grills are basically diamonds and jewelry for your teeth. So you get an insert that goes into your mouth, and instead of having your normal teeth, you have a grill put in. And it has like if you're rich, you have like real diamonds on it.
And is it supposed to be attractive? Because by the end of the game, we had found a picture, whatever they did with it, and I had grills, and it was the stupidest thing ever.
Well,
I looked like a vampire. It was awful.
We're going to have to put that picture up on our socials at Great Gamer What as well. But I'll tell you this much, Dad. I don't think grills are for 68-year-old baseball writers.
Right. Are they for 31-year-old radio hosts like you?
Oh, no, I'm past my prime. I'm a dad now.
So what are they for? Are they for 20-year-olds?
They're for rap artists, baseball players, and yeah, that's pretty much where we land.
Well,
basketball players.
The best I could do was the only grills I know are made by Weber, which was the dumbest thing ever.
People have been waiting since the top of the show. Team Tim, because we're recording this on St. Patrick's Day, obviously releasing the day after St. Patrick's Day. But tell us your Team Tim St. Patrick's Day theme. All players have to have a St. Patrick's tie-in. What do you got?
Well, first off, Tug McGraw, who won 2 world championships, one with the Mets and one with the Phillies. He is obviously Irish. He's the dad, of course, the late father of Tim McGraw.
Yep.
Who is this... explain who Tim McGraw is.
Country music superstar.
Right.
And the funniest part about Tug McGraw is he always wanted to be a country music superstar. And his son Tim always wanted to be a Major League Baseball player.
So Tug McGraw, one of my favorite people ever, the late Tug McGraw, every St. Patrick's Day when he was on the Phillies in Clearwater, he would leave the ballpark and he would go to walk to every Irish bar that he could on the way back to wherever he lived in spring training, go in and have a beer and then go to the next place. He knew where all the Irish bars were. I thought, a big leaguer doing that on St. Patrick's Day. I mean, what a better way to celebrate something like that. I love that.
It's so perfect.
Right. All right. So the all St. Patrick's Day team. Our pitcher is Randy St. Clair.
Love it.
And our catcher is Patrick Bailey, now with the Giants. So we have St. Patrick's already done.
Oh, perfect.
With our pitcher and catcher. Our first baseman is Seth Beer. pretty good.
Yeah.
Tim Ireland, who played briefly, is our second baseman.
Also on the all-country team, if I remember correctly.
Right, absolutely. Joe Mulligan is our third baseman. And we had several people named Stu Clyburn, and others, but we didn't have a Mulligan Stu, but you get the idea. Gary Green is the shortstop.
Perfect.
Of course, Green, yes, I don't have to explain this. Irish Musial is one of the outfielders.
Beautiful.
Trey Cabbage. I couldn't find a guy named Bob Corned Beef anywhere, but we've got Trey Cabbage. Jimmy Welsh is our last outfielder. So that is our all St. Patrick's Day team. And again, if any of our listeners have nothing else to do with their lives like me, most of the time, come up with your own, do better than I do, and we will make corrections the next time we do this and say, someone had a better St. Patrick's Day team than I did.
You can message us greatgameorwhat.com or on Instagram, X, and Facebook at greatgameorwhat. And now we are brought to our guest, Eduardo Perez, which now I'm having deja vu because I remember introducing him a year ago at this time when we had no clue how to do a podcast. And now here we are a year later bringing Eduardo back.
Right. And Eduardo he and Carl Ravitch are my best friends at ESPN. Eduardo is the greatest teammate ever. If you're ever in trouble anywhere, on the air, on an airplane, in an airport, anywhere, you want Eduardo on your side. For instance, Jeff, I had a tremendous amount of trouble parking my car at spring training, even with all the necessary press passes that I have, because they just make it very difficult for some reason in certain places. So Eduardo, in the place where I could barely get my car into the media parking lot, Eduardo rolls in and says, I'm a former player. I need to park in the players' parking lot. They said, go ahead. And that was it. Eduardo always says, act like you've been there before and everything will be great. And I promise you, Eduardo will teach you something and he will make you laugh in this segment.
Eduardo Perez is our guest. Coming up next on Is This a Great Game or What? Welcome back to Is This a Great Game or What? Our guest today is my favorite partner I've ever had on ESPN as a color commentator during a celebrity softball game. It's Eduardo Perez.
And I have to ask, how many times did you host it? I just want to know.
I hosted it twice. One was with you, a.k.a. I think it got nominated for an Emmy, our broadcast.
Shut up.
And then I did another one with ESPN's Tim Kirkshin. He was good, but Eddie, you were next level as a partner.
Hey.
Yeah, the K&K show was great.
Right.
I saw that one too.
Eddie did not dance with JoJo Siwa, but I did. So that put me way ahead. Eddie, hey, the worst dancer ever. We know that. I refused to do it, and Jeffrey, my son, said, Tim, Dad, you got to do this for the good of the show. And I made a complete fool of myself in front of like 9 million people because everybody watched that. I still don't understand why.
And also, Eddie, you remember doing those games, and of course you do this with Sunday Night Baseball as well. The in-game interviews, we had JoJo Siwa do an in-game with us. She talked to us before the first pitch. And when the first pitch was thrown, she said, okay, thanks, guys, and took it off. And we had to explain, no, you're going the whole inning.
My gosh. So, Eddie, if you haven't realized yet, you were the first guest on our first show last year, our first podcast ever. This is our first podcast, official one of the 2025 season. So we brought you back as our first guest this year. And we're so proud to have you. Now, Eddie, before we get to baseball, I'm sorry, we got to talk about your ears. Do you have the smallest ears of any person ever, any big person ever?
Really?
Because I just figured this out. I've known you for 25 years. I've worked with you for 15 years. I finally recognized your ears are tiny. Dad.
Tiny. First of all, we're starting the first show of the 2025 season with my ears.
Yes,
that'll lock me into 2026 season 3 as well. That'll lock me in. You know what though? As my mom would say, and I inherited these small ears from my mom. She goes, embrace them, as she covers hers with her hair. She says, embrace them. And she says, we don't miss a lick. We hear everything because by it being so small, we can hear behind us too. So it's great. It's great.
Well,
and a running joke, since we were little, Jorge Posada and I, he was the opposite, right? He had the ears, and I'm like, you can't hear that behind you, but I can. So we would go back and forth. It was great, and yeah.
And
Small ears.
Yeah, I would
Big
say,
listener.
is it a requirement of Yankee catchers to have big ears? Because Yogi Berra in his prime, big ears,
right?
And Dad, I don't want Eddie to take offense because this is coming from our gene pool, which you have headphones on, but you can see my one ear. I'm only 31, and this Dumbo ear is flying out already. Every time I get a haircut, I feel like I'm going to fly away in the wind.
Right.
Thanks for that, Dad.
Yeah, Eddie's got Jeffrey's got some big ears.
Right.
That's for sure. So.
And while we're there, do you guys get a discount when you when you wax your ears?
Well,
Because I do.
if you don't know the story, Jeffrey and I got our noses waxed last September during a wedding we went to in Montana. I told Eduardo about it because I thought we were the only two adult males ever to get our nose hairs waxed. And he says, oh, I do it every 2 weeks. And then he said, and I do my ears every 2 weeks also. And that still goes, Eddie, right?
100%. 100%. As a matter of fact, I can't wait to go in to start the season in a couple weeks. But I'll tell you right now, guys, this is usually a picture of me getting there.
He looks like a walrus. It's unbelievable. He's got popsicle sticks coming out of his nose. This is embarrassing.
Eddie,
your dad's
I need
a
to
Hall of Famer, Eddie.
I need to put the video that you sent us. He sent us a video from the barber chair, having his ears waxed, saying, this one's for you, Tim. This one's for you, Jeff, to the curtain.
Right here.
There it
Right
is.
here.
Look at him. Oh, my
Right
gosh. Now, Eddie, you have to tell this story because if you don't, I will. When we went to Cuba, you were interviewing the President of the United States, Barack Obama. Tell us the rest of that story. If you don't, I will.
Okay, so I was second in line after Carl Ravage to be able to interview President Obama, and there had been some headlines going on, non-baseball related in Europe that needed to be addressed. So Carl addressed it first with President Obama, and as he's sitting to my left, I'm to his right, and the president is listening to what Carl has to say, and he's speaking to Carl and the rest of us. I could not take away, as I was nervous, to ask the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, in a country, in an island that is not free at all, and I'm sitting next to him, and let's not forget, I'm full-blooded Cuban, and my grandfather from my mother's side would always tell me the stories of this ballpark that we're sitting in. So I'm like hyper excited, and then all of a sudden, I have no idea why, I gravitate straight to his right ear, and there was a hair this long that was just protruding out of the ear, and I so wanted to grab it and just say, give me that. I cannot believe that Michelle did not see this, or the Secret Service. And I always wondered, what happens if I try to pluck that with my two fingers? And it actually calmed me down, and I was able to ask the question that I needed to. But I was hyper-focused on that ear.
Eddie, that's unbelievable because it probably humanized him a little bit. But how can the president of the United States leave any room? Because I've had that happen with coworkers and friends and whatever, and it's kind of awkward, but they're not leaving and going on national TV. Somebody has to be on ear duty for President Barack Obama.
100%.
Right.
I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be that friend. You know, when you have something right in your mouth, right around your mouth, that the person doesn't tell you, but your true buddy, your true friend says, hey, right here, buddy, clean it up. Right here, I got you. But that's where I wanted to say, I've got you. I've got you right here. I know this is your last term. God knows what's coming after you here. I don't know if what you're doing in Cuba is going to work, if it's going to continue, but I need to pluck that.
Yeah.
I needed to pluck.
And Jeff, you've heard this story before, but Eddie was critical of President Obama's first pitch of a game once, the ceremonial first pitch. He didn't have very good effort. And on national TV, Eduardo went after the president. Why? It was so great.
And he came right back at me and said, not all of us are sons of Hall of Famers.
Right.
Right there, I just raised my hands and I said, okay, you've got me. You've got me. If you guys have not seen it, it was at Comiskey, wherever they go, and right there, and he threw the first pitch, and it was not good. And I let him know it wasn't.
Well, and, he was going on the heels of George Bush's presidency, where he threw probably the most famous first pitch of all time after 9/11, Yankees in the World Series, and he threw a strike from the top of the mound. It signified more than just throwing a pitch. It was the country. And now Barack Obama gets slammed at Comiskey but he does have a really good jumper. We do have to say.
He's more of a basketball guy.
He has a really good, I've seen his jumper, and it's very impressive.
And it's amazing conversations that I have with your dad all the time about, you put baseball players, you put hockey players in other activities, and they look very athletic. You put a basketball player or a football player to throw a baseball or to field a baseball or to hit, it doesn't look athletic. It's amazing how this sport, baseball, and I include hockey in it because they're very graceful. They, it's just a lot different.
It is.
John Wall?
It is. I'm told, Darrelle Revis, the best cover corner in the NFL like 10, 15 years ago, whatever. I was the dugout reporter in Tampa Bay one game, and he comes up to me, has no idea who I am, but I'm standing right on the field, and he's throwing out the ceremonial first pitch, and he looks at me and he goes, how do you do this? And I think he's asking me, do I throw from the front of the mound on the dirt or go to the top of the mound? He was asking me, how do you throw a baseball? And he's an NFL player. My whole point has always been, Eduardo, we put a ball of any kind into a big league baseball player's hands, and he's going to know roughly what to do with it. Shooting a free throw, throwing a football, he's going to look athletic, but it doesn't work the other way, which speaks again to the degree of difficulty of baseball.
Yeah, John Wall with the Washington Nationals when he was drafted by the Wizards, terrible. Dad, when we did the celebrity softball game, DK Metcalf couldn't swing a bat, and he is known for being big, and we're thinking he's going to hit bombs, and he struck out.
And he bombed.
Right.
He bombed.
Von Miller, who's the all-time sack leader for the Broncos, bunted in a celebrity softball game because he didn't know how to swing a bat because he'd never played before. How can that happen?
Wins the Super Bowl MVP.
Right.
But if you're a first baseman and you see him running towards the bag, you get out of the way. He's going to be
All right, Eddie, let's switch to baseball and get out of this ridiculous conversation that you and I and Jeff always get into. All right, Eddie, it's opening day today, okay? This is the day the Dodgers and the Cubs open. Maybe it's not the real opening day, but they played a game today that actually mattered. Was there an opening day for you as a player or even as an 8-year-old kid with your dad, Tony, that just stands out above them all for you?
Look, as a kid, and I'll start there because I'm going to go chronologically. As a kid in Cincinnati, opening day was, for me, the best because the Reds played day games. They were the first ones to start the season. That was a tradition that broke probably 20 years ago. But it was the Reds that would always start the season off. And the parade, the whole thing, getting up early, the excitement. My brother and I, just getting ready. We're by the door. Come on, Dad, you're going to be late. Let's go, Dad. You can't miss opening day. And, and just us waving like the season cannot start without us in that parade, seeing all the fans, a sea of red headed towards, at that time, Riverfront Stadium. That was awesome. But then fast forward to my first opening day, and that was in 1994 as a first baseman for the then California Angels in Minnesota. It was at the Metrodome. I would pinch myself, and I'm like, I cannot believe I am the first baseman of a big league team. This is in 1994. I just had elbow surgery, rehab through, could not go to third base at the time because my elbow wasn't ready. And that was a really cool experience as well. And then being able to do it opening day as a Cincinnati Red later on in my career, just put the icing on the cake, because it was like the passing of a torch from having seen it as a kid to a player, and then wondering, why am I not in a parade right now? I went straight to the ballpark. I wanted so badly to be in that parade. But those moments, they never get old.
Eddie,
Did
you get a hit that day at the Metrodome? I mean, what was your first day as a starting player on opening day? How did you do? Did you get a knock?
I you know what? What I do remember, it wasn't the base hit. If I did get one, it was actually the pop-up that I caught in the Metrodome. I was, as a major leaguer, the thing that gave me the most stress were pop-ups. And everybody that was a teammate of mine, if I was playing third base, I'd tell the shortstop, you've got everything. Anything behind me, anything in front of me, it's your ball. The catcher, don't give up on it, because I'm not going to call you off. We're not going to run into each other. Anything up the middle, towards the pitcher, if you think I'm coming after it, I'm going to take 2 steps back before I come after it. So I'm giving you time to call it. I had zero depth perception, and I was not comfortable with pop-ups. And a lot of my errors were balls that landed behind me, because I would always get under it instead of having the ball in front of me. And that was just a perception that I never could get. So instead of me saying, I've got it, I would say, instead of saying I've got it, I would say, don't panic, I've got this one. And if I don't have it, I'm yelling, panic. You got it, I don't.
It's a game of failure. So if you strike out, right, like it's not that big of a deal in the game. But if you drop a pop-up, that's a totally different world.
Right.
It's terrible. And the pop-ups in foul territory, Tim, oh, man, those are the worst, because there's nobody there to help you. The pitcher's not going after it. That's a false hustle. I'm also false hustling towards the ball. And the catcher's going after it, saying, I can't wait for you to call this. And I'm like, oh, man, it's all me. And even though this happens in a probably 3 to 4 second period, it feels like a 2-minute stress level anytime the ball goes up in the air. So when I caught that pop-up in Minnesota, I was like, with the roof, I'm all in.
You know, for baseball fans who are not obviously as serious about the game as we are, there is no foul territory that is the same between two ballparks. So if you're playing in a ballpark you're unfamiliar with, especially in the days that Eddie's talking about, before netting was all the way, you don't know when you're going to slide into a dugout or slide right into the stands or have all the room in the world. So that's what makes baseball so unique, is every stadium is so different.
So, and not only this, the one time that Lou Piniella started me in left field, I believe, was opening day against Toronto Blue Jays at the Trop. And it was Carl Crawford playing center field at the time. Rocco Baldelli was on the IL, and that time the DL. And then I was in left field because there was a lefty on the mound. I believe it was Ted Lilly. I'm not sure. So Johnson, the leadoff hitter for the Toronto Blue Jays, hits a fly ball to left field, maybe 6 or 7, maybe like 20 feet away from me towards my left, towards center field. And as soon as he hit it, panic set in again. I lost the ball, and I'm like, where is it? And Carl Crawford, for those of you that don't remember how he spoke, it was a high-pitched voice. I could not hear him. And I'm like, what? Where? Next thing you know, Johnson's standing at third base. He's standing at third base, and I'm like, this is to start the game. Next ball, hit hard in the gap. 2 runs end up scoring that inning, and it was because the left fielder, yours truly right here, could not see the ball off the bat and up there. Wow. And I don't think Lou put me in left field ever again. Hey, that was the last time he's like, that's it, you're done.
Eddie, speaking of Ted Lilly, you told us a story on the game broadcast the other day about, and help me here, I forget, about looking for a curveball. Like at some point in your career, explain, you stopped looking or you stopped swinging, and Ted Lilly had something to do with it, right?
Well, what happened was we were in Chicago. It was at Wrigley Field, and I just hit a ground ball to the third baseman again against the left-handed pitcher that threw a curveball. I picked it up so well. I said, I've got this. Oh, my goodness, it's a hanging breaking ball. Boom, I hit it, roll over to third base. I get into the dugout. Hal McRae, hitting coach, comes in and says, sit right here. Says, what'd you see? I said, curveball. I said, what'd you do with it? I said, you saw it. I hit a ground ball to third. He goes, okay, so this is what I've noticed. With your swing path, you recognize the curveball. You don't do much with it, so don't swing at it. Just don't swing at it, because the curveballs are designed as, we always hear it on TV, the get me over curveball. That means strike one. You want to get it over in the zone, but after you throw it for a strike, you don't have to throw it for a strike anymore. It's a chase pitch. It's a pitch to show you, so it's going to be a ball most of the time. And he goes, so just don't swing at it. So ever since he told me that, I never again swung at a curveball that was thrown to me. Did not matter what count. It's a hanging curveball. I see it right there, I would take. Fast forward, we go to Toronto. Ted Lilly, first pitch. He's got a really good curveball. Strike one. I'm like, okay, I saw it. Next pitch, curveball, strike two. Okay, I saw it. He goes, he's going to try to get me to chase here again. Next pitch, curveball, strike three. I take it right in. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Next at bat, literally next at bat. Curveball, 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 strike one, strike two, strike three. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. I went 0 for 2, 6 pitches, 2 strikeouts. But I never swung at a curveball. And it worked.
That's amazing. Eddie, you also told, we had Keith Hernandez on the other day, and he was explaining where he got number 7 in his jersey. He was born on the same day as Mickey Mantle. Mm-hmm. So Mickey Mantle wore 7. So Keith Hernandez wore 37. He wore 17, but he had to have a 7 in his number. And I just found out that you had to have a 3. Would you explain that in your uniform number?
I had to have multiples of 3. So my dad was 24, right? And he was number 24 and everything. So when I first got to the big leagues, my first number was actually 21. My first number, was, it was 48, then 21. And those are multiples of 3.
Right.
And then the next year when I was with the Angels, they gave me 24, which that was my dad's number. Great. I get traded to the Reds. Obviously, 24 is retired. Can't wear it. So then I was 39. Dave Parker, all in. And then 33 with the Cardinals. And to me, I was, just multiples of 3. Anything that's a multiple of 3 you can give me. You want to give me number 90? I'm all in. It has to be a multiple of 3. I went to Japan, number 9. So I coached with the Houston Astros, number 33, number 3. So I always wanted to be a multiple of 3. I liked it. I thought it was really cool. Clemente was a multiple of 3. My dad was a multiple of 3. Alomar was a multiple of 3. I thought it was just a really cool way of seeing it.
That is so great. This is what we learned when we ask questions to Eddie.
Now, Eddie, you mentioned being in Japan and playing in Japan.
Yeah.
And so obviously we've got this series in Tokyo right now. I can't get over. It's so cool to see the rabid obsession that they have for baseball. We had Bobby Valentine on last year. Obviously, he is a huge proponent of Japanese baseball and integration into the major leagues and all of that good stuff. Tell us a little bit about your experience playing in Japan and the culture and the love of baseball there.
Okay, so I changed the name of baseball to battle ball in Japan because it did not matter what the score was. The thing is, they are always going to play for that one extra run. Doesn't matter if the score is 21-0. They runners on first, no outs. They're going to bunt. It's just part of the game. There was one game in Japan and that our pitcher was getting rocked. And all of a sudden, here comes our manager, and he takes out the catcher. I'm like, okay, the catcher's putting down the wrong digits. It must be that. And our pitcher throws another 4 innings of great baseball, and it was the catcher's fault. Unbelievable. Maybe 2 weeks later, Same thing. Our pitcher, our lefty's getting rocked. And at that time, I only had one error going into a month and a half of the season at third base. I was playing pretty solid third base, I thought. And it never was pretty because they would always yell at me, Eddie-san! Eddie-san! Miggy! Idari! Idari means left, Miggy means right. So it's like, Miggy! And I take a step to my right. And they're like, no, Idari! And I take a step to my left. So I would play this game with them, and they would get frustrated with me. So here comes the manager, tying run at second base, go ahead and run at first base, where there's 2 outs, and our manager comes out. I'm like, what's he doing now? And then here comes this other guy, a teammate of mine, and he's running out towards third base. And he's like, you're out of the game. So I'm like, why would you do this? Why would you take me out of the game? I kid you not. Next pitch, a hard shot down the line at third base. My guy that came in for me dives towards the bag, gets it, and throws a P-Rod over to first base. Game over. I'm like, I couldn't have done that.
You got taken out of a game with 2 outs in the 9th inning as a defensive replay. Eddie,
yes.
I've never heard of that in my life.
Yes,
You've never seen that in the big leagues, ever.
No, but Japan is different, so I called it battle ball.
Wow.
It was different. The way they taught was different. The duck squats was the beginning of my knee injuries when I had to do it to warm up. But I really loved the experience. They were unbelievable from through and through. The food was phenomenal. The culture was it. Our interpreter, who now is the second in command of their league, it's like he's like the vice commissioner there right now. He would tell me, he goes, we grab everybody else's culture and we try to make it better our own way. We work a little bit harder. If it's being a chef, if it's being a doctor, if it's being whatever it may be, we just do it a little bit different our way, and it doesn't get questioned. But I enjoyed it, and I'm glad that the Guggenheim Group took the Dodgers there again. I'm glad Major League Baseball accepted it, and I'm glad the Chicago Cubs, who relate to the Hanshin Tigers, that's the team that they just played, both the Cubs and the Dodgers, and they both, and the Hanshin Tigers, that's the team I played for. They were known always as the lovely losers and very much related to who the Cubs were for many years. So for them to have the Hanshin Tigers play the Cubs was historic in its own right there in Japan.
Right, Eddie, look, we all know Japanese baseball is great. The guys that come here are greater. The whole country is amazing. But 20 years ago, Bobby Valentine told me, managing in Japan, he said there are 2 types of players in Japan, those who smoke and those who smoke a lot.
Oh.
Did you see that, Eddie? Bobby told me that guys would go down in the tunnel there if they weren't on deck and smoke a cigarette in the middle of a game. Did you see that?
Did I see it? I lived it. I can tell you many of stories. So we always had one bus that was a non-smoking bus, and there was probably like 3 players in there. And then we had the smoking bus, and the entire team was out there. Windows were pulled down a little bit, and it looked like a Cheech and Chong movie, but with cigarettes. The smoke was coming out through the sides, getting ready for the game. There was another game where Ivan Cruz and myself, he was the other gaijin, as they would call us, the other international player, and we're out there. He's playing first base. I'm playing third. It's the 5th inning. It's the going into the top of the 5th inning. He gives me my glove. I made the last out as usual while I was there, and we're going. And he throws me the ball, and I'm throwing it over to him. I'm like, "Where's everybody? Where'd everybody go?" The other team, our team, the umpires, they're all gone. And I'm like, "What's going on here?" And all of a sudden, you can see the smoke coming out of both sides, both dugouts. And everybody is squatted down in a corner. It's a smoke break inning. The 5th inning was a smoke break inning. I kid you not. There's no other way of explaining it. I'll take it a step further. One of our guys gets hit by a pitch. Boom. And he just almost just curls up like a pretzel. And he starts just running into the dugout. He didn't run to first. He ran into the dugout. And we're like, oh, that guy's really hurt. So we just sit there, and I'm like, what's going on? Get a pinch runner. Might as well. That same guy, 4 minutes and 20 seconds later, comes out running towards first, standing ovation. He's okay. You can get, at that time, 5 minutes from the time you get hit. The pitcher has to bow to you. You bow to him back saying, you're okay. Okay, great. But you're going straight to the dugout. You have 5 minutes to get back to first base. So we would see that a lot. It's just different. It's a different culture. It's a wonderful culture. It's the one thing that I took away from that is there's no shortcuts. And I love that part. It taught me that in Japan. And infield is, you cannot play a game. It's frowned upon if you do not take infield before a game. We would have rain delays in Hanshin. It was an all dirt infield in Hanshin. And if there was a rain delay and the game was supposed to start at 6 o'clock and it said the forecast that it would, we're delayed 30 minutes, we're actually delayed an hour because we had to take infield before the game. Wow. It was a show for the fans. And if you did not take infield, you did not play. That meant you weren't ready to play. So I couldn't just say somebody else take it for me. Because if not, then, you're out of the lineup.
Dad, I'm sure you're freaking out at that one because that is something, that's one of those things that my dad always used to say to us, growing up and playing the game and, the art form of taking infield before, that is so important to the game. And we've lost that a little bit here and there. Dad, have you ever heard that before?
No, I love that. I grew up in an era where every team took infield. What we learned as writers, sitting in the press box at 6:35, watching infield before a 7 o'clock start, watching Jesse Barfield throw from right field to the plate. That was as good as the game was to me, and we miss it terribly.
In winter ball, I told my players when I was managing, I managed 3 years, won 2 championships there in winter ball. The only rule I had the basic rules, right? Get on time, be on time, respect the game. And no matter what, it's not a punishment. But on Sundays, we do not take batting practice, but it's mandatory infield for all those that are in the lineup. No excuses. If you don't take infield, you don't start that game. And if you're a bench player, if you're a role player, I don't want you out there. I just want the starting lineup out there. I want the starting lineup up there, outfield. I want 2 throws to second, 2 throws to third. And if you're a left fielder, I want 2 throws to second, 2 throws to home. I want it done right. I want it done game speed. Because one thing that I've noticed on Sundays, especially on Sundays, that teams do not take batting practice, the show and go, you lose a lot of games in the first 3 innings. And in winter ball, during those 3 years, I think our team only lost 3 games in those 3 years on Sundays. Because we came in, we were ready to play, the team was lathered up, and it was go time. It was go time, and the players embraced it. And I remember Pat Kelly, who is now with the Reds organization, he would tell me, he goes, what's the purpose here? And I said, I learned that in Japan. I learned that part in Japan of respecting to take infield. Plus, there are scouts here that it benefits all these guys to see something different,
right?
Something that they're not able to see in a regular season game.
Right. Eddie, you said something else on the air the other day that I found interesting. It's about young players who make a club for the first time and they have a split contract. Would you explain to Jeffrey and anyone else what a split contract is, how many of them that you had, and what is the dynamic behind a split contract?
So they're given to a lot of young players that you don't know if they're going to make the team or not. So let's take, for example, Trey Sweeney, right, from the Detroit Tigers. He was his player last year that came up right before the Little League Classic. And then from that time on, he was a starting shortstop for the Detroit Tigers. Has less than a year's service time. So if he starts the season in Toledo, rightfully so, the Detroit Tigers want to protect themselves, and he ends up not getting major league time, still on the roster. But when he's in Toledo, he could make, let's say, for example, $85,000. Now, when he gets to the big leagues, it's different. It goes to the league minimum salary because he's got less than 3 years service time. And that way, it's a split contract. Just in case he gets optioned down to the minor leagues, he gets the minor league salary. If he gets to the big leagues, he gets the big league salary. At my time, I remember where I had a split contract. The league minimum back then was $109,000. It wasn't $700,000 and plus $1,000. It's different today. The disparity is completely different. But at $109,000, the big league salary, paying it in California where I played with the Angels, I actually made more money with a split contract, making, I believe it was like $70-some thousand in Canada, in Vancouver, British Columbia. When I got sent over to Vancouver, I looked at my salary. I'm going, wait a second. After taxes, I'm better off playing in the minor leagues than I am in the big leagues. Granted, I'm not getting the big league time, but at that age when I'm that young, I'm like, oh, I'll make that up later because I'm going to kick butt over there. But in the meantime, let me make a little bit more money here. It's a really interesting thing that a lot of players that have less, if it's than a year's service or 2 years service, that's how their contracts are set up.
Now, Eddie, this is not the first time that you've had a paycheck confusion, I guess you could say, when you received a check for another Eddie Perez. Is this correct?
Yeah. Okay. So everybody knows that the good-looking Eduardo R. Perez, I learned out Roberto Perez from the Atlanta Braves, who Bobby Cox, I always told him, check your eyes. I need you to check your eyes. To the Hall of Famer, Bobby Cox, would always say, no, he's the better looking one. I'm like, Bobby, he wears a mask. I don't. I'm on TV. He's not. I mean, I'm like, come on, let's be real here. So, all kidding aside, during the strike, during the lockout time, we were, from the Players Association, we were getting checks to make sure that we were okay in the off season so no one would, cross the line or whatever it may be. And all of a sudden, I get a check. He had more big league time than I did. I get a check considerably higher than what I was supposed to get. But I also got my check in the mail, both of them. And I'm going, Eduardo A. Perez, Eduardo R. Perez. The conscience got the best of me, and I contacted Eddie Perez now because my mother won't let me change my name to Eddie. So I'm Eduardo. He's Eddie Perez. I'm the good-looking one. He's not, but he had a lot more money back then than I did.
Right. And by the way, Jeffrey, we're supposed to call Eduardo because that's what his mother wants. His mother still doesn't like him being called Eddie. Correct, Eddie?
100%. 100%. I can't wait for her to listen to this one, too. She was, a matter of fact, just calling me like 5 minutes ago. But it's, yes, one time we're at University of Miami. We're playing the Hurricanes. And she's sitting there, and she's can't wait to see me. She's got 2 seats. It's her by herself and one for her purse because she always had that extra thing. And all of a sudden they go, now batting, first baseman, Eddie Perez. She's like, what? There she goes. Grabbed her purse. I made an out. Went to the dugout. Told Mike Martin, the late Mike Martin, we used to call him 11. She goes, excuse me. Eduardito, come over here. And I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? Eduardito, I'm a freshman. Eduardito, come over here. By the way, I was playing center field, not first. Eduardito, come over here. So I go, yeah. And he goes, you tell him and you tell everybody else your name is Eduardo. And he just walked out. Next time up, now batting, center fielder, Eduardo Perez. Ever since, I'm Eduardo.
That is.
But all my friends call me Eddie. I get it. There was only one person that called me Ed consistently, and it was Pete Rose.
Pete Rose called you Ed even when you were an 8-year-old kid?
Even when I was as a newborn, it was always Ed.
All right.
It was always Ed.
Well, speaking of which, Eddie, we lost Pete Rose in the last year, and you knew him better than anyone. Just tell us a Pete Rose story that we've heard, we haven't heard, on how much he meant to you and how much he taught you about the game.
Yeah, just a lot. I can go from the days that I was a little kid in Cincinnati to when I was 13 years old for the first time in the dugout as a son of a major leaguer with, instead of Perez 24 on my back, I had a big BB on my back for Bat Boy. And I was discouraged by it, and I had to work as a ball boy and bat boy as well. But then I just sat in the dugout and I absorbed everything. And I absorbed everything because it was Pete that said, if you're going to be in the dugout in a big league uniform, you're going to have to watch the game. and observe it and tell me what the pitch is coming and the whole thing. And he was the one that taught me. And at that age, it's such an age where you just are in awe of everything, but you're absorbing everything that happens around you, the osmosis or just the experience itself. And Pete taught me so much about the intricacies of the game behind the scenes during the game, where a fan can see it, but if you're not paying attention to it, it goes right by you. And he taught me that it was a chess match. He taught me everything, the pitcher and hitter. It was a battle. It was a grind. Try to take advantage of every little thing, every little detail a pitcher does. So when it comes to pitch tipping, it was Pete Rose that ingrained that into me. Also, I remember the times where they had changed Marion Way, if I'm not mistaken, to Pete Rose Way in Cincinnati. And he would drive his Porsche, his red, beautiful Porsche, just if it's 100 miles per hour down that road. He's like, it's my road. What are they going to do? Ticket on my Pete Rose gets a ticket on Pete Rose Way. And I'm like, Pete, but it's dangerous. He goes, yeah, but it's more dangerous to stand in the plate and try to hit a 90 mile per hour fastball. So if you're going 100 and then you go slow at 60 in the highway, it feels like you're going really slow, right? So if I'm going 100 now, that 90 mile per hour pitch feels like it's going around 50 miles per hour. So it's not bad. I can hit it. His mind worked differently, but it was awesome to see how it did not matter how much noise was on the outside. Once he put that uniform on, and it was a uniform that even the back pocket had to be perfect. He even taught me how to wear a big league uniform, so it didn't have any creases, to make sure that the shirt was tucked perfectly. The back pockets were tucked neatly and precise. All those little things. It was, one of my dads that would teach me. And I say one of my dads because once I was in that clubhouse, it was not only Pete, it was David Concepcion, it was Joe Morgan, it was Johnny Bench, it was Ken Griffey, it was Cesar Geronimo, it was the young George Foster back then. It was all those guys, Pedro Borbon, Jack Billingham, all those guys, Don Geller, I could keep going on, and Sparky Anderson, that taught us, the kids, how to behave in a big league environment. And to me, that's the beauty of at least the way I was raised in this game.
All right, so Eddie, we did our game, you and Mike Monaco and me and Buster interviewed a fan in the stands, and Ravi did that game, sorry. Do you remember the interview with the 84-year-old lady who's kept score of every game since 1954? Do you remember?
Not at all. The Skanky? Not at all.
So, Jeff, if you didn't see it, Buster asked her, what's your favorite story about Cal Ripken? And Eddie, what did she say?
It had to do with Durant, and I don't want to get involved in it. I don't want to talk about it. I am going to find out before the season is over. I will find out if we get to go to Camden Yards this year. I am looking for her, and I am going to sit next to her with probably a little bag of popcorn, and I just want to hear the story. I want to hear the story. I want to know what's going on.
Right.
I want to put a bug. I want to put a bug right there near her seat and just put one of the cameras just on her the entire time. It's going to be great.
Right.
It's going to be, because I need to know what happened to Cal Ripken's aunt.
Right.
Why?
I'm with you, Eddie. So, Jeff, we also took a trip, several years ago, in a car. Ravi, Eduardo, and I drove between Texas and Houston. We were doing a playoff series on the radio. So we drove, 3.5 hours in the car. And I'm the guy in the backseat, like the annoying little 8-year-old, asking all of these ridiculous questions. And so, Eddie, you remember that? Was that?
That was precise. And then we ended up stopping at Buc-ee's, and Tim had never gone to a Buc-ee's. What's a Buc-ee's? We're not even getting gas at the Buc-ee's. We're just stopping at Buc-ee's.
It's an experience in itself.
It
you
is.
need to go.
It's a 30-minute delay. It's a halftime show. That's what it is. And then the sad part was there was no Diet Mountain Dew.
Right.
In the whole and so your dad discarded it completely. It's like, it's nice, but no Diet Mountain Dew. out of all the soda machines they have there, it was like, this is really impressive, but no Diet Mountain Dew.
Eddie, I have to say, I drove to Nashville to cover one of the award shows in Nashville, and we did a whole bit on my radio station, 92.5 XTU in Philadelphia, and I told Dad, hey, have you ever been to a Buc-ee's? Because that's one of the stops we're going to make along the way. And he said exactly what you said. Oh, Jeff, they're great, but don't expect Diet Mountain Dew. Also, I don't know why I just went into Iago as an impression of my father.
Yes, you did.
I went into Gilbert Gottfried. No Diet Mountain Dew.
So, Jeff, among the many ridiculously stupid questions that I asked for the back seat, I asked Ravi and Eddie, who are in the front seat, give me a food or something that everyone loves to eat except for you. And they said at the exact same time, the exact same thing. Eduardo and Ravi do not like what, Eduardo?
Peanut butter.
Oh.
It's and this is the thing. We do not mix peanuts with chocolate either. So I can't eat a Snickers bar, Reese's Pieces, all that stuff. I suffered as a kid when they would have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Really?
Because every time, in a doubleheader of a game for kids, hey, there's sandwiches over there, PB&J. I'm like, oh.
And you're not allergic, Eddie. You're not allergic to them.
Nope. I just could not stand. Now, you give me peanuts, I'll crush peanuts. You give me jelly, I love jelly. You put a Hershey's bar there, just a milk chocolate, I'll crush that. But don't mix it.
Is there any trauma associated with this, Eduardo?
No, the trauma is actually, now that you mention it, the trauma is actually with Oscar Mayer ham. Because I had to do a commercial when I was younger with my dad, and one of the slices of ham, I don't know why, fell, and I saw it on the floor, and they put it, anyway, they picked it up and they put it in the sandwich, and they gave me that sandwich. And I'm like looking at it, I'm 5 years old, and I'm not too comfortable with this at 5. And they give it to me, and now they want me to chew on it and act like I like it. And I didn't like it. And not only did I not like it, it was like a little crunchy from probably the dirt that fell on it. So the ham, I don't crush it.
So to this day, Eddie, you're not going to eat, you're going to hesitate at eating a ham sandwich because of what happened when you were 5.
If it's that type of slice,
right.
I love ham sandwiches and everything, but if it's that type of slice, I don't crush that.
Eddie, I don't think even Daniel Day-Lewis could have sold liking a slice of ham that fell on a floor and then eat it and enjoy it. I don't care if you were 5 or 50 and an Oscar-winning actor. That's hard to sell.
Yeah, it is. It is, but it is what it is. But you know what? If you pay me enough, I'll chew on it and I'll act like I like it.
All right, Jeff, we're done with Eduardo. This is so amazing. I've known him forever, and I learned 5 more things on this podcast that I'd never heard before from Eduardo. The favorite, of course, is his mom yelling at the manager for calling him by the wrong name.
Well, I had this written out since the beginning of that story to say goodbye to Eduardo Atanasio Perez in honor of his mother, full name, Eduardo. Your mom can get mad at my dad. I don't want your mom getting upset with me. So Eduardo, Mr. Perez, if you will, thank you for joining the podcast. And to Mama, give her our best. Your family is always, we said it last year, but you are a Kirkshan, and you've given us some Latin blood as well as some culture in our family.
Latinos, we never stress, and poor Papa.
Poor Papa.
Eddie is a Kirkshan, only he's got giant feet and tiny ears, but the rest of him there's a lot of Kirkshan there, which is not a good thing. Eddie, this
and no hairy back.
You're lucky. You are lucky.
Jeffrey bought me a back shaver for my birthday when I was an adult once. That's what I got. So I could shave.
You're a manscaper.
And then showed him how to use it, Eddie. That's the embarrassing part. I did it for him.
That is so bad. Can we please end this before it gets any more embarrassing for poor Pop Pop?
Poor Pop-Up. New segment on the show this year. You called it, Eduardo.
Eddie, that was so much fun.
That was Eduardo Perez. And, Dad, second year in a row we had him as our first episode of the season. It's going to have to be a tradition. You mentioned it at the end. We learned more about Eduardo in this 40 minutes we had on with him than ever before. I had such a blast talking to him.
Yeah.
He was great.
Eduardo still tells stories I've never heard before, and that makes it so great. And the highlight for me is when he said, "Poor Pop-Pop," because that's
which is a new segment on the
it's a new
show.
segment on
great.
the show. Poor Pop-Pop, and Eduardo's a part of it now. So good.
And don't forget, to everybody listening, right, we have another episode that will come out this Friday. So we're now releasing episodes on Tuesdays and Fridays during the week. Tuesdays will feature an interview with someone as amazing and funny as Eduardo Perez, hopefully every week. And then Friday, we won't necessarily always have a guest, but we'll have more great content for you. If you're a baseball fan, this is the podcast we're so glad that you're a part of. Share it with a friend or family member. Follow us on social media at Great Game or What. And thank you so much for being a part of our family.